I was still stationed outside Al Udeid when the email came through. 12 years of marriage, gone with a PDF. No warning, no conversation. Just the subject line. Let's handle this like adults. Her message was 3 lines long. She'd filed the divorce. She'd emptied our joint savings. She'd moved her new boyfriend, Caleb, into our condo in Asheville. My name is Marcus Reed. I'm 41st First Sergeant with the 173rd Airborne. I stared at the screen, blinked twice, and shut the laptop. Then I walked to the showers. The desert heat made everything feel sticky, but the cold water didn't wash off what I was really feeling. When I got back to my tent, I replied with a single word. Noted. No anger, no drama. Just silence. My squadmate Price noticed something was off. "You all right, Sarge?" he asked, not looking up from his deck of cards. I nodded. "Just some stuff from home." We didn't press. In the military, we learn when to ask and when to let someone breathe. Truth is, part of me had already seen this coming, and deep down, I'd been bracing for it. If this story speaks to you, or if you've ever had to rebuild from scratch while standing in silence, give this video a like. Subscribe for more stories that dig deep into real human resilience. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. 6 months before deployment, little things began to shift. Natalie stopped asking how my day was. She'd stay late at the clinic where she worked reception, saying they were short-staffed. She started going to Pilates twice a week, but always came back without a drop of sweat on her shirt. New clothes appeared in her closet, brands she never used to wear. And suddenly, there were passcodes on her phone. I didn't confront her. That's never been my way. I don't believe in accusations without clarity. But I wasn't blind either. So I started preparing quietly. I opened a private savings account at a different bank, funneling a portion of my paycheck there, just enough to build a cushion if things went south. I rented a small storage locker on the edge of town, tucked away the essentials. My grandfather's compass, our marriage license, my discharge papers, and the deed to the condo, purchased through my VA benefits in my name. I wasn't planning to leave her. I was just making sure I wouldn't be left with nothing. The night before my flight, she hugged me at the airport. "Stay safe, okay?" she whispered, her eyes dry, her voice light, like I was a friend going on a business trip, not her husband heading into the desert. I should have known then. But part of me still wanted to be wrong. I met Natalie at a 4th of July cookout back in 2011, while I was on leave visiting my cousin in Charlotte. She had a spark, sharp wit, warm laugh, and eyes that locked in like she actually listened. At the time, she was finishing up nursing school but later pivoted to admin work at a wellness clinic. "Less stress," she said. We got married the following spring. Natalie used to say she admired my discipline. She told her friends she was proud to be an Army wife, though I always sensed she didn't fully understand what it meant. Her father was an insurance adjuster. Her brother worked in IT. The military was another planet to them. Foreign, distant, unnecessary. She'd ask me things like, "When are you going to get a normal job?" As if leading soldiers and jumping from planes was just a hobby I'd grow out of. But this wasn't a phase. It was my career, my calling. We bought our condo in Asheville in 2015. Modest but comfortable. My name was on the mortgage, VA loan benefits. But I added Natalie to the deed, because that's what you do when you believe in forever. We had good years, especially at the beginning. Quiet mornings with coffee on the porch, movie nights after long days. But each time I returned from deployment, something small had shifted in her. A little colder, a little more absent. And I kept hoping it was just the distance, just time. But deep down, I was already taking mental notes. By late 2020, the cracks were no longer subtle. Natalie started acting annoyed when I called during her girls' nights, like I was interrupting something sacred. She talked a lot about her friend Sasha, how she divorced her husband and was finally living her best life. I didn't miss the way Natalie lingered on that phrase. Then came the comments. We don't even have much in common anymore, or you're always gone. I suggested couples therapy, hoping we could patch what was fraying. She brushed it off. We're just in a rough patch, she said. It'll pass. But it didn't. She started spending weekends out of town with friends I'd never met, bought a whole new wardrobe, signed up for a gym membership and barely used it. And yet, every time I tried to talk, she kept it surface level, always smiling, always dismissive. I didn't push. I've never been someone who yells or accuses. My father taught me to think before I act. Move with intention. So I kept watching. Quietly. I kept preparing, because my gut was screaming that something was coming. And when you've worn a uniform long enough, you learn to trust your gut. 2 weeks after that email, I was sitting in the chow tent when my phone buzzed with a banking alert. Another withdrawal, this time $76,200. I froze. My hands, trained for years to stay steady in chaos, trembled. I opened the app. Our joint account was down to just under $20. Our savings, $42,000 we built over a decade, completely gone. I set my fork down, walked out into the scorching Qatari sun, and stood by the edge of the barracks. My world wasn't just shifting, it was collapsing in real time. Later that night, I called the bank using the limited phone access we had. The rep on the other end confirmed what I already suspected. Natalie had been moving the money in pieces since the week I deployed. Small withdrawals at first, then larger. The day after I landed overseas, the big transfers began. When I hung up, I didn't go back to my bunk right away. I stood in the hallway, watching the other guys laugh, FaceTime their kids, talk to their wives. Life continuing, uncomplicated. That's when Price found me. You look like you saw a ghost at dinner, he said, leaning against the wall. My wife drained our accounts, I said quietly. Moved her boyfriend in, sent divorce papers. He didn't say sorry. He didn't offer a pep talk. He just asked, what's the next move? I didn't have an answer yet, but I knew I'd find one. Because the war wasn't just out there anymore. It had followed me home. If you've ever felt that kind of betrayal, you're not alone. Like this video if it resonates. Subscribe for more stories that speak to the scars we carry and share it forward. Someone out there might need to hear it tonight. Sleep didn't come easily that night. My mind was on fire. Quiet, calculated fire. Around 200, I opened my laptop and logged into the security system back home. I had installed cameras the year before. Natalie thought they were for package theft. She forgot they backed up to the cloud. There he was, a guy I'd never seen before. Early 30s, scruffy beard, walking our dog like he owned it. Drinking from my coffee mug, wearing my Seahawks hoodie. Standing in the kitchen I had remodeled with my own hands during my last leave. And there was Natalie, laughing, barefoot, pouring wine. That moment didn't shatter me. It clarified me. I closed the laptop with a calm I didn't feel and pulled out my notebook. I made a list. Called Jordan, my buddy from Ranger School. He's a lawyer now. Check the terms on the VA loan. Review the refinance documents Natalie once mentioned in passing. Secure my pension account. File for emergency leave. This wasn't about emotion anymore. This was about mission prep. At 0500 before morning formation, I sent Jordan an email. Subject, legal help, discreet and urgent. An hour later, he replied, call me, secure line only. When I hung up from that call, I knew my course. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need revenge. I just needed to let her keep digging. Because this wasn't just personal anymore. It was strategic. 3 weeks later, I stepped off a red-eye flight back to North Carolina. No announcement, No warning. I didn't text Natalie, didn't call, just checked into a cheap motel under a fake name and called Jordan. We met at a diner just outside Asheville, off the radar. He slid a folder across the table. Everything we discussed, he said. Deed, loan records, joint account activity. And this, he pulled out a single page. My signature. Or something trying to be. It was a refinance application. $310,000 pulled from the equity of our condo. Only problem? That wasn't my handwriting. The middle initial was wrong, and the loops in the signature were too tight. Someone had tried to fake it and failed. Natalie did this? I asked, though I already knew. Jordan nodded. 3 months ago. Listed her new boyfriend Caleb as a co-applicant. And he's got a history. 2 DUIs and a fraud conviction. 2018, I sat there, fingers clenched around my coffee cup. Busy couple, I muttered. Forge my name. Take out a loan, drain our savings, file for divorce while I'm in uniform, halfway around the world. Jordan didn't smile. It gets worse. They tried to sell the condo last week. It stopped me cold. I stared at the folder again. My name, my property, my future, sold without a word. What are my options? I asked. Jordan looked me square in the eye. First, you need to decide. Do you want justice or just to walk away? I didn't even blink. I want both. The next morning, I parked a block away from our condo and watched from behind tinted glass. Caleb's truck was gone. Natalie's car sat in the driveway like nothing had changed. I didn't knock, didn't want a confrontation. That wasn't the plan. Instead, I drove straight to the local bank branch, the same one that processed the refinance. I asked to speak with the loan officer who'd signed off on it. He looked up from his desk when I walked in, eyes narrowing as I handed over my military ID. This is my property, I said, calm but firm. And that is not my signature. He glanced at the documents, then at the ID again. His face went pale. I'll have to report this immediately. I already filed a police report, I said, sliding him a copy. You'll be hearing from my attorney, too. That night, Natalie sent the first text in weeks. Who have you been talking to? Caleb said someone was at the bank asking questions. I didn't reply. 2 days later, I went to the county clerk's office and filed a fraud dispute against the refinance. I also requested a legal hold. No changes to the property without my signature. That afternoon, she called. I let it ring. Her voice landed in my voicemail like a ghost. Marcus, we need to talk. The bank called. What are you doing? If this is about the divorce, we can work it out like adults. Those words again. Like adults. But adults don't forge signatures. Adults don't steal. Adults don't lie to someone serving overseas. The next day, Jordan called me. Bad news or good news depending on how you look at it, he said. They froze the refinance funds. I exhaled, tension unwinding for the first time in weeks. And there's more, he added. You know Caleb's been driving your truck? The one in my name? I asked. Yep. Got pulled over this morning. Suspended license from the DUI. They impounded the vehicle. I didn't say anything. Just stared at the motel ceiling. Jordan continued. Cops found prescription pads in the glove compartment. Not blank ones. Stolen. From the clinic Natalie works at. My jaw clenched. You're saying she's stealing prescriptions now? Looks that way, Jordan said. Police are opening an investigation. I hung up and just sat there for a while, the silence pressing in. Part of me wanted to call Natalie, warn her, ask her what the hell she was doing. But that part of me was fading, because now I wasn't looking at a broken marriage. I was looking at a criminal operation. She hadn't just betrayed me. She'd exposed herself. The house, the forged refinance, the money, the stolen prescriptions. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the first time they'd done it. I pulled out my phone and checked the cloud footage again. Hitchin, the dog. The sweatshirt Caleb wore that used to be mine. and I didn't feel heartbreak anymore. I felt focus. The next morning, I sat across from a bank fraud investigator named Thompson. His tie was crooked, coffee stain on his shirt sleeve. He looked like someone who had seen too many people at their worst. "This sort of thing happens more than you think," he said, spreading documents across the desk. "Spouse deploys. Other spouse sees an opportunity." "Not an opportunity," I said. "A crime." "We've frozen the funds from the fraudulent refinance," he replied. "But—" I already knew there'd be a but. "About half is already gone. $14,600 transferred out before the freeze." I leaned forward. "Where did it go?" Thompson hesitated, then slowly turned his monitor so I could see. Names, amounts, timestamps. Several payments to someone named Daniel Spencer. "Who's Daniel Spencer?" I asked. "Real estate," he said. "Not my department, but you'll want your attorney to subpoena this." I left the office and called Jordan right away. "Spencer, huh?" he said. "Give me an hour." When he called back, his voice was low and steady. "Daniel Spencer's a real estate agent. Quick sales, cash buyers. He's done deals with Caleb, 3 in the last 2 years." I stood in the middle of a park, phone pressed to my ear, heart thudding. "You're saying this isn't just Natalie cheating on me?" I said. "This was planned." "Looks like it," Jordan said. "Caleb gets involved with women whose husbands are deployed. Properties sell under market value to Spencer's clients. Caleb gets a cut. Then he disappears." "And Natalie?" I whispered. "We don't know yet. Could be a victim, could be a partner." If you've ever had to question everything you thought was real, you know how that sentence feels. Like this video. Subscribe if you want to see how this ends. And share it for anyone who needs to be reminded. The truth always leaves footprints. That night, I sat alone in my motel room, lights off, the glow from my laptop casting long shadows across the wall. Couldn't stop replaying Jordan's words. 3 properties, 3 women, same guy, same real estate agent. And now, me. I opened a new folder on my desktop, named it Operation Closure. Inside, I dropped every document, every screenshot, every recording. I reviewed the footage again. Natalie laughing in the kitchen, Caleb showing Spencer around like he owned the place. Then I sent Agent Patel an email. Subject, happening now. Attached were security credentials and direct access to the live camera feed. 30 minutes later, unmarked vehicles lined the curb outside my condo. I watched from down the street as agents moved in. Swift, quiet, practiced. Within moments, Spencer and Caleb were led out in handcuffs. Agent Patel called. "We got them on tape. Wire fraud, conspiracy, forged signatures, attempt to sell property without owner consent. It's airtight." I looked up toward the second-story window of what used to be my home. Boxes carried out. Agents moving through rooms I once painted with my own hands. Then came the message from Patel. "Your wife just arrived. She's on the lawn. She looks shocked." I didn't ask to speak to Natalie. I didn't need to. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. And justice had just knocked on her door. The federal case moved fast. Caleb and Spencer both flipped, each blaming the other, each exposing new layers of the scheme. It turned out this wasn't isolated. 3 states, a dozen military families. One blueprint. Target the ones deployed, exploit the silence, sell low, and vanish. And Natalie? She denied everything. Said Caleb convinced her I'd been hiding money, that I planned to leave her penniless. Said the refinance was all his idea, that she just signed what he gave her. Maybe that was true. Maybe it wasn't. Either way, she agreed to a settlement. Full restitution of the money she helped disappear, signed confession of the forgery, and forfeiture of any claim to the condo or my pension. In return, I didn't press criminal charges. The divorce was finalized 6 months after that first email in Al Udeid. No drama in the courtroom, just a quiet stamp of irretrievable breakdown. The day the papers were signed, Agent Patel called. Marcus, Caleb just got 8 years. Spencer got 12. And there's something else. We found evidence they've done this to 11 other servicemen. Your case helped crack it open. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in the silence of my one-bedroom rental. No applause, no celebration. But for the first time in over a year, I felt still. What Natalie and Caleb tried to take wasn't just money, it was stability, identity, trust. But what they never understood was this. Men like me don't break, we rebuild. A year after everything was finalized, I sold the condo. I couldn't stand to walk through those rooms anymore. Every wall, every tile held echoes I didn't want to live with. I used the money to buy a cabin outside Missoula, Montana. 2 bedrooms, 10 acres, a creek that ran clear even in winter. No neighbors for miles. I retired early. 20 years in the Army. That was enough. I'd given all I had. Now it was time to learn how to be still. I got a dog, a German Shepherd named Scout. Loyal, steady, no lies in his eyes. I started doing simple carpentry work for people nearby. Porch repairs, fence gates, things that kept my hands busy and my mind from circling too hard. Most days were quiet. Some were heavy. Occasionally, I'd think about Natalie. Word was she'd moved back to Oregon, working at another clinic, starting over. I didn't hate her, not anymore. But I didn't miss her either. She made her choices, and I made mine. One afternoon, I got a letter from a woman in Fort Worth. Her husband was Navy, deployed when Caleb and Spencer tried the same scheme on her. You don't know me, she wrote, but because of your case, we kept our home. Thank you, I read it twice. Then I pinned it to the fridge. Some days, when the silence felt too wide, or the memories crept in like fog, I'd look at that letter and remember. Something good came out of all this. Maybe I didn't just survive it. Maybe I changed the ending. It arrived on a Tuesday. No return address, just my name scrawled in careful print on a plain white envelope. Inside was a folded letter, written in blue ink, the kind that fades at the edges when someone presses too hard. Dear Mr. Reed, you don't know me, but I've known of you for a while now. My name is Erica Monroe. My husband was in the Air Force. We were stationed at Travis when Caleb Connors entered our lives. I sat at the kitchen table. Scout curled at my feet as I read her story. It mirrored mine in places I wasn't prepared for. He was charming at first. Said he knew what it was like to be with someone always gone. Said he could make life easier. Before I knew it, he had access to our finances. I signed things I didn't understand because I trusted someone I shouldn't have. She described the foreclosure, the bank letters, the late-night panic attacks. But then came something else. When I saw your name in the court filings, I finally stopped blaming myself. I realized I wasn't alone. What you did, standing up, pressing charges, refusing to be silent, it gave me the strength to go back and reopen my case. My hands tightened around the paper. I hadn't thought of it that way. To me, it had all been reaction, defense. But to someone else, it had looked like courage, Mum. Thank you, she wrote, for showing someone like me that surviving wasn't the end. It was the beginning. I folded the letter back up and placed it on the fridge, right beside the first thank you note I'd received from Fort Worth. The house was quiet, the wind outside brushing through the pines. And for the first time that week, I smiled, not because something had been avenged, but because something had been changed. Last I heard, Caleb was still serving his sentence in federal prison. Spencer, too. The justice system, for once, had done its job. As for me, life slowed down in the best way. Morning started with coffee on the porch, Scout at my feet, the mountains stretching silent and wide beyond the trees. I built a workshop out back. Nothing fancy, just a place to make things with my hands. Birdhouses, tables, Pieces that held, even if everything else once broke. I didn't chase closure anymore. I didn't need answers from Natalie or explanations from the past. Sometimes, I'd get a flicker of a memory. Her laugh at the cookout where we met, the first night in our Asheville condo, the way she once looked at me before deployments. But memories soften with time. They lose their edges. Then one evening, I got a text. It was from Natalie. I never meant for things to end this way. I stared at it for a long time. No anger, no hurt, just a kind of quiet knowing. There was nothing left to say. Because what we were no longer mattered. What I'd become did. And in the stillness of that Montana night, with the dog asleep at my feet and the scent of sawdust in the air, I realized something. She may have walked away from what we had, but I had finally walked into who I was meant to be.